The real target isn't bad budgeting, it's moral confusion plus structural pressure. Most personal finance books pretend the central enemy is individual irresponsibility, overspending, poor discipline, lack of knowledge. Crash Course on Capitalism and Money comes from a very different diagnosis. Many people are already trying hard, yet still feel financially stuck. That stuckness isn't only mathematical, it's psychological and ideological. The book is aiming at a specific modern crisis. People are working harder and feeling poorer. The usual do the right things advice: save, invest. Grind often feels insulting because it ignores rising costs and precarious work. The internet intensifies comparison, lifestyle inflation, and anxiety. Many readers are caught between two narratives. If you're struggling, it's your fault. The system is rigged, so nothing you do matters. The authors are trying to resolve that contradiction by offering a third frame. You are not crazy, and you are not powerless. The system matters, but agency still matters if you choose the right kind. The emotional problem, shame plus exhaustion. The book is built around the lived reality of salaried workers, especially in expensive cities. The shame of not keeping up, the exhaustion of the grind, and the constant feeling that adulthood is a treadmill, instead of treating those as side effects. The authors treat them as the heart of the problem, because shame and exhaustion are not just feelings, they are behavior shapers. Shame makes people hide mistakes, avoid learning, or chase status purchases to prove they're okay. Exhaustion makes people default to convenience, spending, and short-term coping. Both push readers into decisions that worsen long-term outcomes. The conceptual problem: people confuse wealth with status. The book's deeper critique is that modern capitalism is very good at training people to equate being rich with looking rich, success with consumption, freedom with premium versions of the same trap. That confusion is profitable for markets and painful for individuals. The authors want readers to stop optimizing for appearance and instead optimize for optionality. The ability to say no, switch paths, and survive shocks. The strategic problem: advice that's technically correct but practically unusable. A lot of finance guidance is not wrong, it's just unadapted. It assumes stable wages, low rent, and predictable career ladders. It ignores mental bandwidth, caregiving, immigration constraints, debt, and unstable housing. It frames hardship as a temporary hustle phase, which can become an endless loop. The book's main problem statement, in one sentence: how does an ordinary worker build real financial resilience and autonomy in a world where the rules feel unfair, costs feel out of control, and financial success is constantly missold as lifestyle? A two-level method, system lens plus personal lever. Their approach is rhetorically clever. They acknowledge structural realities: wages versus costs, inequality, the myth of meritocracy, without landing in nihilism. This is hard to do well. Many authors pick one lane. Traditional finance: ignore the system, focus on you. Political critique: the system is the problem, your choices don't matter. Crash Course instead uses a two-level frame. Macro truth: capitalism and urban cost structures create real constraints. Micro strategy: within those constraints, there are still high leverage moves. This does two things. It validates the reader's experience, you're not imagining it. It reactivates agency, but you can still win, just not by playing the status game. The book uses narrative economics, not academic economics. It doesn't try to prove capitalism's flaws with heavy data. It uses storytelling, analogies, and everyday trade-offs. That choice fits the audience, readers who want clarity and permission more than theory. In practice, their explanatory style relies on meme-resistant definitions: wealth as freedom, not luxury. Moral reframing: spending equals values, debt equals risk management, investing equals ownership. Identity shift from consumer to owner, from anxious worker to strategic planner. Their engine is psychological. Money is behavior under emotion. Even when they discuss investing or savings, the underlying model is behavioral. People don't fail because they can't understand compound interest. People fail because they make money decisions in states of fear scarcity, shame comparison, fatigue low bandwidth, desire status, belonging. So the book constantly tries to reduce those states and replace them with Calm clarity, realism no fantasies, self-respect no shame loop, long-term thinking optionality. They de-influencer the reader. A major part of the book's method is subtractive, stripping away the false scripts sold by hustle culture, work 24/7 or you're lazy. Luxury culture, if you don't upgrade, you're behind. Finance bro culture, just optimize and you'll be rich. They don't merely give advice, they attempt to immunize the reader against financial propaganda. The moral stance, compassionate but not permissive. This is important. The authors empathize with constraints, but they do not excuse avoidance. Their tone is, yes, it's hard, and yes, you still need to act. That combination, validation plus insistence, is a signature strength. It's motivational without becoming fantasy. Here are the ideas that function as the book's load-bearing beams, the arguments that everything else sits on. I'm phrasing them as principles because the book's power is conceptual, not procedural. One life is unfair and denial is financially expensive. The book treats fairness thinking as a hidden risk. If you believe outcomes are guaranteed by effort, you may overextend because it'll work out. Take on lifestyle commitments that assume steady growth. Ignore risk buffers because you expect stability. Accepting unfairness isn't cynicism, it's a risk model. It's the shift from, I deserve security, to, I must build resilience. That's foundational. 2. Your biggest enemy is the status treadmill, not the lack of income. Not always literally, but conceptually, the treadmill converts any income into anxiety by making enough a moving target. The treadmill is powered by social comparison, advertising, peer norms in expensive cities, social media highlight reels. Their claim is, if you don't exit the treadmill, even a higher salary becomes just a more expensive cage. This is one of the book's strongest contributions. It treats consumer identity as the mechanism that capitalism uses to keep people compliant. 3. Wealth is optionality, luxury is performance. A classic but powerful reframing. In their worldview, wealth equals ability to choose time, flexibility, security. Luxury equals outward signs, often financed, often fragile. This distinction changes decision-making. It pushes readers to value emergency funds, mobility, skills, low fixed costs, diversified income, instead of higher rent, financed cars, aspirational brands, treat-yourself cycles. The book implicitly argues that finance is downstream of lifestyle structure, fixed costs, relationship choices, housing decisions, career path risk, health and mental energy. If you fix the structure, the math gets easier. If the structure is unstable, no spreadsheet saves you. This is a subtle critique of optimization culture. Many finance books turn life into a spreadsheet. Crash Course tries to redesign the life so the spreadsheet becomes manageable. 5. Capitalism sells you solutions that maintain the problem. This is the woke element. Markets monetize insecurity. If you feel behind, you buy courses, aesthetics, productivity hacks, premium lifestyles, success signals. The book argues that capitalism often doesn't want you satisfied, it wants you perpetually upgrading. The reader is urged to recognize that many solutions are really products that keep you anxious. 6. The most powerful move is controlling your fixed costs. This is the quiet, technical spine beneath the narrative. Fixed costs determine how long you can survive unemployment, how much you can invest, how free you are to pivot. Many books focus on investing returns. This book focuses on the base, reducing the burn rate so investment becomes possible. 7. Investing is not a get-rich dream, it's an ownership strategy. They treat investing as a long-term transfer from labor dependence to asset dependence, a way to benefit from growth rather than being crushed by it. This is not the stock-picking approach. It's likely aligned with broad, steady, patient ownership. The ethos matters more than specific tickers. 8. Financial progress requires emotional regulation and social boundaries. A lot of people fail not because of ignorance, but because they can't say no to friends, no to family expectations, no to weddings, trips they can't afford, no to identity spending. The book's deeper point, capitalism is social. Money decisions happen inside relationships and communities. So wealth building isn't only math, It's boundary setting. 9. The 2020s reality. Volatility is normal, not exceptional. The book places adulthood inside a context of instability. Layoffs, pandemics, inflation shocks, housing pressure, career disruptions. So it shifts the reader from plan for normal times to build for shocks. That means buffers, flexibility, multiple skills, less fragility. 10. Freedom is built slowly, and the slow path is the only honest one. This is an anti-scam principle. The authors position slow compounding as the real revolution. Not overnight breakthroughs. This inoculates readers against crypto hype cycles, influencer promises, secret systems. In other words, the book sells realism, not dopamine. It treats capitalism as part of the financial curriculum, rare in personal finance. Most mainstream American personal finance books are politically neutral or pretend neutrality. They present finance like physics, universal laws, no ideology. Crash Course breaks that convention by saying, the system shapes your outcomes. Incentives matter. Markets actively manufacture desire and insecurity. That's controversial mainly because it violates the genre's unwritten rule. Don't talk about power. Talk about habits. This difference is not cosmetic. It changes the tone from self-help to social realism. It's finance advice for salaried workers, not entrepreneurs or high earners. A lot of finance literature is quietly built for high-income professionals with surplus cash, entrepreneurs with scalable upside, Americans in lower-cost regions historically. This book is more honest about the salary ceiling feeling, especially in expensive cities. It doesn't glamorize entrepreneurship as the default escape, and it doesn't assume the reader has massive margin. That relatability is a big differentiator. The controversy is that it may feel discouraging to people who believe anyone can become wealthy purely through hustle. The book's message is, hustle isn't a plan if the structure is broken. See, it attacks looking rich culture more aggressively than most books. Many authors warn about lifestyle inflation, but few frame it as a systemic trap tied to capitalism's growth engine. This book pushes harder. Status is not a harmless preference. It's a mechanism of control. Consumption is not just spending, it's identity labor. That's a deeper critique than the usual don't buy lattes. It blends mental health realism into money in a way finance books often avoid. Personal finance is usually written as if readers have infinite motivation and zero anxiety. Crash Course implicitly acknowledges burnout, emotional spending, scarcity mindset, comparison spiral. This makes the advice more humane, but also more opinionated because it treats financial behavior as inseparable from psychology and culture. It's a de-scamming book in an era of money content saturation. Many newer finance books compete with TikTok, YouTube hype by becoming more hype themselves. This one resists that arms race. Its stance is, distrust shortcuts, distrust performative wealth, build a boring system. That's different and arguably anti-content because boring doesn't sell easily. Yet it's exactly what a lot of people need. Possible points of pushback where critics might disagree. To be genuinely analytical, here are credible critiques. System critique without policy depth. If a reader wants a rigorous economic explanation, wage stagnation data, housing policy, monetary dynamics, the book may feel more like cultural critique than economic analysis. It's persuasive, but not academic. Agency tension. The book says the system is unfair and you still have agency. Some readers may feel that's emotionally supportive but practically unclear. How much agency depends heavily on income level, citizenship, health, and family support. Urban focus. Most expensive city framing is powerful, but can narrow universality. Readers outside those environments may find some constraints less relevant. Risk of overcorrecting into frugality identity. Attacking status spending can inadvertently create another identity trap. Moral superiority through deprivation. The healthiest version is values-based spending, not austerity as virtue. The real newness is the worldview, finance's resistance. The book's most distinctive contribution isn't a novel budgeting method. It's the idea that building personal wealth is not just personal improvement. It's a form of resistance against consumer conditioning. That's why it resonates with younger audiences. It makes finance feel meaningful, not become rich, but become free enough to live honestly.